Welcome to Health Systems CIO's interview with Tiffany Kuebler, Medical Director of Clinical Informatics with the University of Maryland Medical Center. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Tiffany, thanks for joining me.
Anthony, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm looking forward to it. Tiffany, you want to start off by giving us some information about your organization and your role?
Absolutely. I wear a few different hats, so I'll start with my clinical hat. I have been a physician assistant at the R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center, which is the largest freestanding trauma center in the country that is part of the University of Maryland Medical Center. I've been there about 18 years now. And I am co-director of medical director of clinical informatics for the medical center. And then we are the academic medical center as part of the University of Maryland medical system. And at the system level, I am the director of our Epic physician builder team. So I lead a team of about 25 clinicians who have also been certified as builders through Epic to build clinical EMR tools.
All right. Very good, very good. So I guess you were not at UGM this week? You didn't swing over there
No,
to Verona?
I usually go
Mm.
this year. Family reasons kept me home, but I did
Okay.
have the opportunity to watch the executive address, which is both entertaining and informative as usual.
Any initial thoughts on things you've heard coming out of there one way or the other? Any feelings there?
Yeah, I think the sentiment that everybody has been putting out there and that I share with them is Judy came to play. She did not back down from Epic's participation in AI. She's really kind of doubled down on how much they are offering in Epic. I think there was some surprise at her solidifying their partnership with Microsoft and being reliant on Microsoft's platform for a lot of their AI innovation.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how competitive that makes them with some of the other players in the field.
Yeah, because it's sort of been their mantra, their DNA to be very independent, right?
Very independent.
And to have such a dependency on another organization, I suppose they figured that they had to do it, that this was the best path for them, that going it alone wasn't going to work this time around. Is that what you would assume?
That's my assumption. You know, I was there at UGM. It was a few years ago now when Microsoft's CEO came out, which was really surprising since usually they never let folks like that onto the stage and as part of UGM. So that certainly dropped a couple of jaws. And it really seemed then that they were accepting that the AI platform that Microsoft had built was so much more robust than Epic was going to be able to develop. And so they wanted to keep their focus on what they can do best and let Microsoft's AI platform be the foundation that which they build off of the EMR. So it's very interesting to see how this has progressed over the last few years.
Yeah, and I always, it's extremely interesting in healthcare, especially with the Epic dynamic, the way that an organization, a health system, is so tied to its EMR vendor. I mean,
Mhm.
it's so tied, and Epic is quite dominant in that space. And you always, I've had different discussions with people about this idea of vendor capture and giving up your innovation to your EMR vendor and just sort of being beholden to their product roadmap. And some people fight that more than others in terms of trying to do things on their own when the vendor roadmap is going to be too long for a functionality everybody wants. Okay, we're going to have to do something at least as a stopgap, an interim, either build it ourselves or partner with a niche player. And then maybe someday when Epic catches up, we're going to switch back over. All that kind of dynamic. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that dynamic of this concept of vendor capture and not letting that happen and making sure you're staying nimble, even sometimes when it requires going outside of your core suite?
I've typically thought of technology companies like, do you ever watch Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen
Yeah.
Nightmares?
Oh my God. That's one of my favorite shows ever.
So, do you notice the theme with him, which is when restaurants try to make their menu too big and they try to do
100%.
too much.
100%.
And I have typically found with technology companies, when they stray from their niche and they try to do too much because they're
Uh-huh.
trying to increase their market capture, they're trying to be everything for everybody, that's when they really start to falter because they stretch themselves too thin. They go beyond where their expertise lies, and it doesn't really work. I think Epic is mostly an exception to that because of how large they are, how long they have been um, expanding their reach. I mean, their campus is in magnitude should tell you, how many resources they have to dedicate to each aspect of healthcare in the EMR. But it was very clear from UGM that they noticed that there were areas of healthcare innovation where they had not advanced far enough, and there were other players in the space that were trying to fill those gaps. And it's very clear that they now want to fill their own gaps. um, whether they have enough of a competitive advantage to convince their customers to just add on another one of their modules as opposed to going with another vendor that may be a little bit further down the path in innovation remains to be seen how compelling their argument is going to be.
Very interesting. Um, yeah, trying to, and ambient AI is the big space they're moving into now, and that's really interesting because you have some, I guess, very large niche players that have raised an incredible amount of money and getting some serious traction in health systems. Um, and then Epic comes in and says, "Hey, hello." And so that's a little scary for those companies and their investors, but it's very fascinating to see how this is all going to play out. Any more thoughts on? Yeah,
It's a very interesting horse race that we're
yeah,
watching right now. Yeah.
yeah, yep. Lots going on there. When we talk about whether to stay in suite or go out of suite, those kind of decisions, sometimes it seems like um, you have competing viewpoints. You have the IT leadership, which may have a preference for staying in suite and seeing the upside there on staying within the family of products that their core vendor offers. And sometimes you might have a differing opinion from operational folks that are a little more tied to the particular niche in question, saying, "I like this piece of technology. It's awesome. It's got more." And you have the CIOs that are weighing a bigger picture, also ongoing total cost of ownership. And these things have to get hashed out and governance and all that kind of thing. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, I attended the HIMSS hosted an AI in Healthcare Summit last month. And one of the main themes that everybody has echoed, which I think is really important here, is that AI is a tool in your toolbox. It's not a technology decision anymore, and shouldn't be thought of as a technology decision. So these decisions shouldn't be driven by your CTO. They aren't, nor are they business decisions alone. These are a lot of really clinically based decisions. And so having your clinical stakeholders in the room at the table as part of these conversations, that's as much the components that need to be weighed in these decisions. And so while it may make technology sense, security sense, ease of purchasing and implementation sense, what we really need to think about are the people that are going to be using it and the workflow challenges that it's going to solve. And that should be the guiding light in determining whether you take Epic's module or you take another third party vendor. And then also thinking about this space is evolving almost faster than I can even read all of the articles to keep up, which is really exciting that we're finally in a place where healthcare is getting this much innovation. But you really have to think about how long of a contract are you going to sign, because chances are somebody is innovating something else that may be better in another 6 months or a year. And so being able to not tie your cart to a horse that is, maybe not going to be meeting your needs in a year or two anymore, and allowing your organization to reevaluate and stay nimble is going to be really important too. Balancing with the fact that you've got end users that are reluctantly accepting a lot of new technology and maybe don't want to have to learn new things over and over and over again. So it's a delicate balance to figure out the right way to go, and every organization is going to have to figure that out for themselves.
Well, you're making a lot of great points there. There's so many issues there. You talk about functionality in and of itself is one thing to look at. There's also integration, right, with other. We don't want standalone silos or applications, so there are things that have to be weighed there. What would integration take? What would it cost? And ongoing costs of integration if it's outside the suite versus the pure functionality and how much better it is. It's not just that it's better. If it's 5% better, maybe a different calculation than if it's 20% better, right? Because there's so many things on each side. And you talked about the ability to accept change and the concept that we want to be flexible and be able to not get locked into a long contract so we could switch products. But then you mentioned the other great point, which is we can't be switching products out on our users all the time, even though we might like to. And that's really where you live, right? I mean, you live in that space of using the technology. That's informatics, right? So, and that's a huge area. It's a huge issue I've been talking to a lot of people about. And one of the main issues there that I'd like to hear from you about is this idea that I've actually got a webinar coming up on this soon. This idea that this is not a big enough focus, at least for IT leaders, the actual training and the
Mhm.
usage of the applications. And there's not enough budgeting being done towards this. It's almost like either we'll just take care of it or it's not a big deal, but it is a huge deal. And it takes a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of resources. And if you don't do it, you are not going to get anywhere near the benefit from these technologies. So I'd like your thoughts on this being quite a challenging element of this whole process that is not getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah, you focused on two things right there, actually. One is the implementation effort, and the education effort, and they go hand in hand. I think to start with the implementation effort, if you don't know the problem you're trying to solve, if you don't know the workflows, if you don't know the language of your end users, you're not going to be able to translate that to a technology solution, regardless of what tech you're using, whether it's AI or not. And that's the niche in where I and my informatics colleagues live, especially as builders, is we are so well versed in the EMR technology, the AI technology, how it's built, how it works, and we can speak to our clinical colleagues about what that means for them and how that might translate to a workflow solution, so we can bridge the gap of two parties that don't really like to talk to each other and don't speak the same language. And part of a successful implementation, as you note, is has been teaching people to use the technology. But this is a whole different suite of technology than anybody has seen before. And aside from probably a small minority of younger generation clinicians, there is really a large swath of the clinical community that maybe uses ChatGPT casually. They see Gemini pop up in their Google results when they search, but they don't really understand how the technology works. And so, in order for them to not only use it safely, but also build trust with their patients, they have to understand how it works. They have to understand um, bias and hallucinations and drift and this whole new language of the technology that they probably aren't familiar with. And if they don't know those things, they don't know what they have to be vigilant for. They don't know what oversight they need to provide for the technology that they're using, because it'll be different with ambient versus, something that is summarizing chart insights or surfacing something for you before you go to see a patient. Um, and so if we aren't investing upfront in educating our constituents in not only how to use the tool, but how the tool works and how that's going to impact their clinical care, I think that we run the risk of it not being used effectively, them being frustrated, not having safe, effective care being delivered with its presence, and we run the risk of losing trust from our patients. And we can't have those things and have successful advancement in healthcare at this point.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this idea that there's something fundamentally different about AI and how it's changing the dynamics of everything. So this is not just implementing different technology, newer technology. We've done that for years. We kind of know how to do that. This is fundamentally a different thing that's
Mhm.
happening. And I don't think we even understand the repercussions of that or what that means. But I have heard other people say that training is different. Obviously, the usage is different. The interaction with the technology is different, should be easier, right? Instead of clicking 7 places, and maybe I can just speak and it can understand me and provide the response I want. But the fundamental difference here, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it's is what I'm thinking. I like to think in analogies. It used to be like a calculator. Technology used to be like a calculator. You put in information, you're going to get a number. It's pretty cut and dried. It's going to give you what it wants. This is way more subtle and nuanced, and the different flavors, 1,000 different flavors, what you're going to get. So it's
Mhm.
fundamentally different. And I think the point you're making here about the flaws in the system that everyone's trying to make better with the hallucinations and the bias, you have to understand that it's not a calculator. A calculator doesn't have bias and hallucinations, just gives you a number, right? So am I on the right track? Is what the way you're describing it and what I'm thinking, that this is something fundamentally different. People like you understand that. And your job now is to help the users understand that so that they don't say, "Oh my God, I'm used to a calculator getting a number back. This number is wrong. Throw this thing in the garbage. I'm never using it again." No, you have to understand that there's way more going on here. And just because it's a little off to the left or off to the right, don't throw it out yet, because it's going to get better and better. And maybe you did your query wrong. And maybe if we made some sort of internal LLM or whatever you want to call it, we didn't do it perfect. So the query's not working right. Maybe it's the underlying data. So am I on the right track here? But I want to hear from you now.
Yeah, I see this in two different populations. So you've got your buyers, that's likely the C-suite folks at your organization who are going to be ultimately making the purchasing decision. Do they know enough about the technology to assess the vendor, to know how, ask questions about how the model has been trained, to make sure that it has been evaluated for bias, that they're monitoring for hallucinations and drift? And what does that look like? What are their processes? What is their guarantee to you as the purchaser of their product? And if you don't know enough to ask those questions, anybody can put together a really shiny presentation, and folks are so interested in being able to deliver technology solutions to their clinician end users right now that they may not be able to differentiate between a shiny object and something that really has a lot of substance.
Hmm.
And then you've got the end users, the clinicians, who there was just a study published. I just read it 2 days ago. Apologies that I can't quote the journal off the top of my
Okay.
head, but it was comparing three different LLMs and the word choices that it generated based on whether it was transcribing a visit with male patients or female patients. And it inherently ended up using word choices that were a little bit more biased towards women, and kind of reduced the what's the word I'm looking for? Reduced the importance of the concerns that they had. It kind of downplayed their healthcare concerns. Women's women's healthcare already suffers from that at baseline, that women have a really hard time a lot of times getting people to take them seriously when they're reporting a concern. This is especially a problem in postpartum populations. And so something that subtly, if you're not looking for it, you may not notice it, but subtly, let me try some English, biases the readers, that's baked in, and you don't even realize that that may be coloring the judgment of the people who are reading it. And those are the kind of things, if you're not aware of that, you may fall victim to what, and how does that propagate in your system?
Hmm.
And then what does that do to the patient care that you are delivering and the customer service that you are presenting to your patients? So those are the kinds of things that I think everybody needs to be mindful of. And to your point, this is such a different technology beast like we really haven't seen
Mm.
before, that it really is, everybody's going to have to learn a little bit of a new language, whether they want
Yeah.
to or not.
Yeah. It's very interesting. You mentioned evaluating a new vendor, and really taking a look at different things. It's a different evaluation process, and you have to really know what you're talking about. And not everybody has that skill set. You mentioned either when we started or before we start, I think during the interview here, about trying to read as much as you can. So drinking
Mhm.
from the fire hose, right? And everybody's doing it, and some people are using things like ChatGPT to help sift through some of this stuff. So that's interesting, right? We're using the technology to help us understand the technology and sift through it. So that's all fascinating. People are trying to keep up. No one can know everything. Um, so you need to either figure it out or have people on your team who are figuring it out, right? So you need to have someone who's figuring it out. You mentioned evaluating new vendors. One of the interesting nuances I've been discussing with people is sort of AI coming into your organization, and not stealthily, but with perhaps a lack of intentionality on your part, because you're taking an upgrade from an existing vendor that
Mhm.
now has AI in it. So you're using AI, you've started using AI without thinking about using AI, or without picking a new vendor, because and I think that's happening all over the place everywhere. There's so much going on with people trying to figure out the proper governance for this. Is it its own thing? Is it part of technology? Even people are talking about that around ambient listening and scribing tools, and whether or not it's its own thing, or it's not its own thing, and it's just now they're trying to make that sound like it's just one element, and it's you got to be bigger than that, right? All these kind of things going on, people trying to figure this all. What do you think about that whole thing with coming in through an existing vendor? And I think the health system people are saying we want transparent communication about that. So again, that's fundamentally different than a regular upgrade. You as a vendor, you need to tell us, because
Mhm.
this may need to go down a different governance track, your new upgrade. So we need transparency. We don't want to find out about it after the fact. What are your thoughts around all that?
I think that in order to build trust, which is so important with new technology, regardless of what your AI does, I think transparency is something that you should want to offer anybody that is going to buy or has already bought your software.
Hmm.
Because now I understand you're not going to be super transparent about everything, until there's a BAA in place, right? Everybody's
Right.
got, IP that they're trying to protect, and I completely understand that. But if your product is solid, if you believe in how you built it and the methods in which you use to train it and the output that it delivers, you should want to be transparent about what it does and how it works and what that means for the users. And if you're not, that should raise a lot of red flags. But to your point, I think that until we get to a point where AI is just everywhere every day, I think it has to be a separate, deliberate governance. There are still so many aspects that healthcare organizations are figuring out as we go for the first time. Whether it's through a new vendor or an existing vendor, hey, this is a thing we've never had before. what does this mean for our users? What does this mean for our data, for our security, for our medical legal risk, for our compliance and regulatory folks, for our data capture and reporting, and we really have to have a 360-degree evaluation of that. And the more that you have something structured in place so you can evaluate every AI tool by the same benchmarks and the same yardstick, then I think the easier it will become. And then maybe there will be a point where it doesn't need to be evaluated separately. It can be part of your typical vendor assessments. But I
Hmm.
think right now there's still so much variability and in quality, the vendors are so new and they really haven't been around long enough to have any sort of track record that you can go off of. One of the questions that I've been getting a lot, I have a side hustle, as the kids call it, and I'm old enough to say things like as the kids call it. Two of my colleagues and I do some healthcare IT consulting
Hmm.
to help organizations and health tech developers with exactly the kinds of things that we've been talking about, the translating the clinical medicine and the technical
Right.
aspects of clinical care. And the number one things that people are looking for are um, first person evaluations of all of these AI companies. They don't want to just read a briefing or read some studies. They want to really talk to people and say, what have been your experiences? And some of these companies are still so new that there just aren't enough people out there that have tested them out robustly enough to be able to speak to not only how well did the implementation go and how well did the users like it right away, but what about in 6 months or what about in a year and what are the numbers looking like beyond that? And that's really a challenge is we don't really have, unless you're a Microsoft, and some big name companies like that, the newer folks really, there isn't a ton of data out there yet to help the other healthcare companies just getting into the game to be able to um, feel confident in their decision because they've seen it be successful at other places.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing for these companies. They need customers in order to sort of have credibility. But it's hard to get those customers without having credibility and having customers. So, it's hard to get that snowball rolling for them.
Right.
And that's why, and it's risky on the buyer's part, and that's why lots of people are going to stay in suite and stay with
Hmm.
that. You buy the Epic suite, Microsoft's very little risk, but you have, and I don't want to make it sound like IT executives are too risk averse or anti-innovation. They are not, but I do believe they have many other things in mind, reasonably so, that they're weighing that can cause them to tilt towards staying in suite. um, but if you do that too much, and if you have too much of a tilt, then you're not being responsive to your users and what they need. So it's quite a balance. I'd like to ask you a little bit more, and then I'm going to let you go in a minute here about training and sort of that's your expertise, informatics. I think it's um, I don't know. I feel like it's becoming more and more important. Um, I don't know why. Maybe it's the AI stuff, or maybe it's because it's been neglected. But I feel like the informatics training, because I think we were in a phase where implementation was the goal, end all be all,
Hmm.
right? Pick the so the biggest issue years ago was these decisions were being led by IT, and that was causing a lot of problems, a lot of failed implementations, because the users would get the technology and they'd be like, "This stinks. How'd you even come up with this? We didn't ask for it.
Hmm.
We don't want it." So then everyone said, okay, users got to be user led, user selection, user led. We're there to support. Okay, so that's the thing. Implementations went better, and technology got implemented. A few months ago, class came out with a report that said um, there's problems around use. There's numbers problems around use. People are not that happy with the stuff you're putting in,
Hmm.
CIOs, right? So you got to get away from checking the box saying I implemented it. That's not the end all be all. Now it's use. It's you can implement it, if nobody uses it, you failed. So
Yep.
use. That's informatics. So it's more and more important. Um, it's a big issue because it's not just after the implementation. There's new employees, there's existing employees who are learning um, software upgrades that have really changed the functionality. You have to train them. There's all kinds of different layers, and then there's all departments, and then there's different levels of use. There's again people that are younger starting new or less experienced. There are people who are very experienced. There's people that require different levels of attention. There's VIPs, let's be honest. There's VIPs. Right? Dr. So and so, whoever the person may be, is our busiest cardiothoracic surgeon. You're not telling him to watch a video. If he doesn't want to watch a video or she doesn't want to watch a video, you come to the office. You say, "Where can I meet you? Where are you going to
Hmm.
be? I'm happy to show you this thing." So, just your thought or best advice to someone trying to get their arms around this training issue a little better.
Well, first, I want to say I have to give a shout out to my clinical boss, the chief of shock trauma, who is 74 and one of my best students. He uses technology reluctantly at best, but if you show him how to do it, he's got it. And I think look, yes, there are different levels of skill and levels of learners for sure, but there's also people learn differently. If you show me how to do something, that's a lot better than you talking at me. We had, shock trauma is very unique in that we have a cadre of rotating residents and they change every month. And during the month, they change out on a rotating schedule. We have over 300 rotators a year. And every 2 weeks, we're getting new folks for about a month at a time. And so they have a lot of unique workflows to learn in our EMR, whether they've used Epic before or not. And we've got a finite amount of time to train them, and then they've got to be able to get on the floor and go to work. And we were doing in-person training, which turned out to be a lot of me talking at them. And I would get a lot of blank stares, no matter how interesting I thought my training was. Right? Nobody wants to be talked at. And
Right.
so, with the help of University of Maryland Medical Systems training department, we built asynchronous learning modules. And it's not then just the module talking at you, now it's interactive. And so now you're actually having to pay attention and show that you are understanding. And we did this for inpatient onboarding, and they're expanding that, which I think is really helpful to make it interactive because now you're actually drawing people in and showing them, look, click here, and this is how you can do that. Epic is really unique in that there's multiple ways to skin a cat in almost every workflow. And so you're not going to get everybody. It's so continuing that education, while no one likes continuing education, if you can boil it down into distillable bites and you can show value, this is going to save you time. Nobody wants to learn something new. They hate it. I
Yeah.
don't have time for it. Just let me keep doing the
Right.
workaround that I've done forever.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because I at least know that. And now you've gone to move my cheese. I
Uh,
don't, I don't want to deal with it. But if you can show real value, I think most people will appreciate that, even if you have to hold them down and spoon feed them the medicine a
right.
little bit. The other hard part is how do we deliver information to busy clinicians? Nobody reads their email anymore, even the really important emails. It's really hard. You're getting a large volume of information. And so the challenge that training departments have and informatics elbow support has is how do you meet people where they are and give them the information in a way that they are receptive to and helps them? And everybody's a little bit different. And so offering different options of learning,
Hmm.
whether it's drop-ins, in services, rounding at the elbow, little embedded snippet videos, still putting out the emails. I think the only way that you're going to get a high rate of uptake is to be able to offer different ways for people to interact with that information and as asynchronously as possible, because people can't necessarily just stop what they're doing at the time that you happen to be on the unit to offer them education.
I think that's brilliant. And what I was thinking as you were talking, maybe I'm giving you a suggestion. But no, it's this idea that um if we know that doing this thing in Epic, let's say, or whatever, we know that doing this thing uh, should take this amount of time or this many clicks. And I don't know if we have the data or have reports where these three physicians are taking way longer than it
Hmm.
should to do this thing as far as we're able to tell what they're trying to do and what we think it should take. Now we send them the asynchronous message that they can open what they want, which says, Dr. So and so, you seem to be taking a little more time than our average with this thing. Here are some ways we can help you. I can meet you. We can meet you. You can come
Hmm.
here. You can watch this video. So you've identified, because maybe they don't want to take that long doing that thing. And oh, really? There's a quicker way to. So it's very targeted. Do you do stuff like that?
Yeah, so Epic actually offers data. There it's a module called Signal because the thing I love about Epic, everything has a name. And it gives you an assessment of how you're doing compared to others.
Right.
And so it really can narrow down on, hey, there's you spend a lot of time in orders. You spend a lot of time on your notes. Let's see how we can help you be more efficient. Let's see if we can reduce the number of clicks or the number of minutes that it's taking you
Yeah.
to write a note or complete an encounter. It's not perfect. One of the things that I noticed is there's a lot of recent literature that female physicians spend more time in their in basket responding to patient messages and spend more time writing notes. Theory being that they may craft more thorough replies or spend more time researching before they write their response. But one of Epic Signal's limitations is that it does not let you compare by gender. Um, so that was a little disappointing when I figured that out because I am curious if that's something that tracks in our organization, like I have seen in the literature.
Yeah.
And there's also variations in practice, right? If you notice that a surgeon has a lot of pajama time, well, pajama time is measured 8 anything after 5 p.m. Well, if the surgeon's on call, they maybe intentionally saved all of their clinic notes for
Oh
when they're
yeah.
sitting in their office on call.
Sure.
So now it's not pajama time at all. They're actually being really efficient with their time. And so you really have to kind of apply situational
Oh
awareness
wow.
to the data that you see.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking like, hey, I played golf today because I was planning to work tonight, and now I'm on
Right.
for 4 hours because I played golf for 4 hours. It looks like I'm suffering, but I'm
Right.
just being flexible with my time. So as you said, there could be a lot of nuance in there.
Exactly.
Very interesting. So that's all good advice. That's wonderful stuff. We're about out of time. This has been wonderful. Tiffany, what's the name of your company? Put a little plug out there.
Oh, thank you. It is Diagnosa,
Diagnosis.
Diagnosa.
All right. Well, congrats. Sounds like you're a busy person. You got 3 day jobs and a side hustle. So, and you had time
Well,
for us today. So we appreciate that.
thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.
All right, Tiffany. I hope we can catch up with you down the road. Have a
Sounds
great
great.
day.
Look forward to it.
Thank
Thanks.
you.